Rain hammered against the towers of Blackthorn Castle hard enough to sound like stones. Not ordinary rain. The kind that swallowed sound across an entire kingdom. The kind servants remembered years later when whispering about the night their Luna disappeared. Inside the western corridor, every torch along the wall shook under the force of the storm. Shadows stretched across ancient stone floors. Guards stood near the council chamber pretending not to listen. But everyone inside the castle was listening, because the Moon Council only gathered after midnight when something dangerous was about to happen. And, on that particular night, Lyra Vale was never supposed to hear any of it. The corridor was almost completely dark when she turned the corner carrying a silver tray of untouched tea meant for Alpha Kael's private meeting. Her steps slowed immediately. Voices. Low. Sharp. Tense. The council chamber doors were not fully closed, and Kael was inside. At first, Lyra almost walked away. Almost. But then she heard her own name, and everything stopped. The tray in her hands trembled softly. Inside the chamber, one of the elders spoke first. The Northern Alliance is collapsing faster than expected. Another voice answered immediately. Then Blackthorn needs stronger blood tied to the throne before winter. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that made Lyra's stomach tighten before she even understood why. Then another council member spoke. Selene Morvath would stabilize the Eastern Territories overnight. A chair scraped slowly against stone. Someone leaned forward. The Pax already expected Alpha Kael to choose her years ago. Lyra's fingers tightened around the tray. Selene. Of course it was Selene. Beautiful. Untouchable. Born from an ancient Alpha family. The woman noble houses still called the true Luna behind Lyra's back. Lightning flashed through the stained glass windows. For half a second, Lyra could see her own reflection in the chamber door. Pale face. Tired eyes. A Luna who suddenly looked like a stranger inside her own home. Then came the sentence that nearly stopped her breathing. The kingdom needs a stronger Luna. Kael's voice. Cold. Controlled. Certain. Lyra froze. Not because he said it, because of how easily he said it. No hesitation. No anger. No defense. Nothing. Inside the chamber, another elder continued speaking. If the transition is handled carefully, the people will accept it. And Lyra? That question came from someone near the far end of the table. A long pause followed. Too long. Then another voice answered quietly. She can be removed without public embarrassment. Removed. Not divorced. Not protected. Removed. Like a political inconvenience. Lyra blinked once. Slowly. As if her mind refused to understand what her ears had just heard. Rain crashed harder against the castle windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains surrounding Blackthorn territory. But inside that hallway, everything became strangely quiet. Because heartbreak does something terrifying when it arrives all at once. It silences the world first. Inside the chamber, the council continued speaking while Lyra stood motionless outside the doors. Selene's family controls half the eastern military routes. The southern Pax would immediately support the marriage. And stronger heirs would secure the bloodline. Stronger heirs. That phrase hit differently. Because only hours earlier, Lyra had walked through the lower healer chambers alone. Only hours earlier. An old healer with trembling hands had looked into her stunned eyes and whispered words she still had not fully processed. You're carrying Alpha heirs. Twins. The healer had confirmed it twice. Twins. Lyra remembered sitting there speechless while rain tapped softly against the healer tower windows. She remembered touching her stomach without thinking. Remembered the strange mixture of fear and happiness rising inside her chest. For one fragile moment, she thought maybe everything between her and Kael could finally change. Maybe the distance between them would disappear. Maybe he would finally look at her like a mate instead of a responsibility. Maybe this child. No. Children. Maybe they would become the reason he finally loved her. But now, standing outside the council chamber, hearing strangers discuss replacing her before he even knew she carried his bloodline, something inside her began collapsing quietly. Inside the room, Selene's name surfaced again. Once the mating ceremony is announced, public support will shift naturally. And Lyra? Another pause. Again that horrible silence. Kael still said nothing. Not once did he defend her. Not once did he tell them to stop. Not once did he say, "She is my Luna." The storm outside deepened. Wind screamed through the high castle towers hard enough to shake the iron torch brackets. And suddenly, Lyra understood something that hurt far more than betrayal itself. This conversation had been happening for a long time. This was not anger spoken in one reckless moment. This was planned, discussed, calculated, which meant every cold glance, every lonely dinner, every sleepless night beside a distant mate, had been leading here. One elder lowered his voice. The people already questioned her ability to produce heirs. Another answered immediately. Then the transition must happen before the rumors damage the throne further. Lyra's eyes closed slowly, because none of them knew. None of them knew the weak Luna they mocked was already carrying the future heirs of Blackthorn. And Kael had no idea. A dangerous ache rose inside her chest. Not rage. Not yet. Something worse. The realization that she had spent years begging silently for love from a man already preparing life without her. Inside the chamber, a goblet touched stone. Then Kael finally spoke again. We proceed carefully. That was it. For words. For calm words that shattered whatever hope Lyra still carried. No defense. No hesitation. No fight for her. Just, we proceed carefully. A servant suddenly appeared at the far end of the hallway. Lyra reacted instantly. She stepped backward into darkness before being seen, clutching the silver tray against her chest hard enough to leave marks across her fingers. The servant passed by without noticing her. But inside the chamber, the meeting continued. The Luna cannot suspect anything yet. Lyra's breathing became uneven, because for the first time in years, she realized something terrifying. Everyone inside Blackthorn Castle already knew her marriage was ending, except her. Lightning exploded across the sky. The entire corridor flashed white, and in that single burst of light, Lyra looked down unconsciously toward her stomach, toward the secret growing inside her. Twins. Kael's heirs. The heirs the council claimed she could never give him. Her throat tightened painfully, because suddenly another thought entered her mind. If they were willing to replace her this easily, what would happen if they discovered the children before she escaped? The word escaped. That was the first moment the idea appeared. Not revenge. Not anger. Escape. And once that thought entered her mind, it refused to leave. Inside the chamber, chairs began moving. The meeting was ending. Lyra stepped backward quickly into deeper shadow before the doors opened. Her heart pounded violently now. Not from fear alone, from realization. Because the life she thought she was protecting inside this castle never truly existed. The doors creaked open. Council members emerged one by one beneath flickering torchlight. Old wolves. Cold faces. Heavy robes. People who had already decided her future while smiling at her during royal dinners. And then Kael appeared last. Tall. Composed. Unreadable. For one terrible second, Lyra thought he might sense her nearby. But he didn't. He walked straight past the corridor without noticing the woman standing silently in darkness only feet away. His Luna. His pregnant Luna. The mother of his unborn heirs. And somehow, that hurt more than everything else combined. Because after years beside him, Kael no longer even felt her presence. The corridor slowly emptied. Only the storm remained. Lyra stood there alone for several seconds without moving. Then finally, very slowly, she placed the untouched silver tray on the floor beside the wall. Her hands were shaking now. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just enough to reveal the exact moment a heart begins breaking beyond repair. And somewhere deep inside Blackthorn Castle, a clock struck midnight. The sound echoed through the halls like a warning. Because what Alpha Kael Draven still didn't know was that his Luna had already made a decision. And before sunrise, Blackthorn Kingdom was going to lose her forever. The next morning, Blackthorn Castle behaved as if nothing had happened. That was the cruelest part. Servants carried trays through the hallways. Guards changed shifts. Council banners hung proudly from the stone walls. And somewhere inside the same castle, where powerful men had quietly discussed replacing their Luna, Lyra Vale walked through the corridors completely alone. The storm from the previous night had faded, but the castle still felt cold. Every hallway suddenly looked different to her now. Every stare lasted too long. Every whisper sounded sharper. Because once betrayal reveals itself, every memory begins rearranging itself around the truth. The moment Lyra entered the lower dining hall, conversations dropped immediately. Nobles seated beside the windows exchanged quick glances. A servant lowered her eyes in pity. Another looked away too fast. They knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to make the Luna of Blackthorn feel like a guest inside her own kingdom. Lyra continued walking carefully toward the royal table. Her face remained calm. Years of emotional neglect had taught her how to survive humiliation quietly. But something was different now. Last night had changed the way silence felt. Before, silence carried hope. Now it carried warning. At the far end of the hall, Alpha Kael Draven stood speaking with military advisors near the throne platform. Tall, composed, completely unreachable. The same man who once held her hand during their mating ceremony now barely looked in her direction during public gatherings. And somehow, that distance had happened so slowly that Lyra spent years pretending it wasn't real. A noblewoman near the center table leaned toward another guest. She still sits beside him like the throne belongs to her. Soft laughter followed. Lyra heard every word. She kept walking. Another voice whispered, "I heard Celine arrived late last night." That sentence tightened something deep inside her chest. Because Celine Morvith never entered Blackthorn Castle without purpose. And almost as if summoned by the whisper itself, the massive dining hall doors opened. Conversation shifted instantly. Celine entered wearing deep crimson silk beneath a black fur cloak. Every noble in the room noticed her immediately. Beautiful, confident, dangerous. She walked through the hall like someone returning to a place she already owned. And when her eyes found Lyra standing near the royal table, she smiled. Slowly. Like she already knew something the Luna didn't. Kael finally turned at the movement near the doors. For half a second, his expression changed. Not warmth. Recognition. The kind that hurt worse. Because Lyra suddenly realized Kael looked more awake seeing Celine enter the room than he had looked beside his own maid in months. Celine approached the royal platform calmly, while nobles watched openly. Nobody even pretended to hide the tension anymore. A council member pulled out a chair for Celine personally. Too close to the Alpha throne. Too intentional. Lyra saw it immediately. So did everyone else. Celine sat gracefully before lifting her gaze toward Lyra. Then came the sentence that made the entire hall go silent. A Luna shouldn't have to beg her own maid to look at her. No gasp followed. No outrage. Because everyone understood exactly who she meant. Several nobles immediately lowered their eyes toward Lyra. Waiting. Watching. Hunting for humiliation. And Kael heard every single word. He stood only a few feet away. One sentence from him could have stopped everything. One sentence. Instead, he said nothing. That silence spread through the dining hall heavier than screaming ever could. Lyra felt heat rise behind her eyes instantly. Not tears. Humiliation. The kind that burns deeper because it happens publicly. Celine leaned back slightly in her chair. Satisfied. Because this wasn't random cruelty. This was positioning. Every insult. Every rumor. Every public moment. Celine was preparing the kingdom to accept a new Luna. And Kael's silence was helping her do it. A servant carefully approached Lyra holding tea with trembling hands. The poor girl could barely meet her eyes. That hurt too. Because pity had officially replaced respect. Lyra reached for the cup slowly, then froze. A sudden wave of dizziness hit her hard enough to blur the room for a second. Her hand instinctively moved toward her stomach beneath the fabric of her dress. Nobody noticed. Except one person. Celine. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, just briefly, but Lyra caught it immediately, and suddenly panic moved through her chest. Had Celine seen that? Had she noticed? Across the hall, Kael finally looked toward Lyra. For one dangerous second, their eyes met, and Lyra hated herself for what happened next. Because even after everything, some broken part of her still waited for him to choose her, defend her, walk toward her, say something, anything. But Kael only looked away and resumed speaking with the council advisors beside him. That moment destroyed something final inside her. Because heartbreak becomes fatal when hope survives longer than dignity. The dining hall noise slowly returned around her. Forks scraping plates. Low whispers. Muted laughter. Meanwhile, Lyra stood in the center of it all carrying the heaviest secret in Blackthorn Kingdom. The Alpha's heirs.
His children.
The future bloodline his council believed she could never give him. And suddenly, remaining inside this castle started feeling dangerous. Very dangerous. Because if the council discovered she was pregnant before replacing her, everything would change. A nobleman near the eastern table lowered his voice carefully. I heard the council may announce changes before the winter gathering. Another answered, then the Luna truly has no idea. Lyra turned away immediately before they realized she heard them. Her breathing became uneven again. Every hallway, every conversation, every stare. The castle was already moving against her, and Kael either couldn't see it or refused to stop it. Hours earlier, before the midnight council meeting, Lyra had stood inside the healer's chambers alone. The memory hit her suddenly. Warm candlelight, shelves filled with herbs, rain tapping softly against tower windows. The elderly healer had looked nervous from the moment Lyra entered the room, especially after placing her hands over the Luna's stomach. At first, the woman said nothing. Her expression only became stranger, more alarmed. Then she checked again, and again. Finally, she whispered, "You're carrying alpha blood." Lyra remembered staring at her silently, confused. The healer's hands trembled. There are 2 heartbeats. That moment replayed in Lyra's mind now, while nobles continued whispering around her in the dining hall. Twins. The words still felt unreal. The healer had stepped closer afterward and lowered her voice carefully. My Luna, you cannot tell anyone yet. Lyra had frowned immediately. Why? The healer hesitated too long, then finally answered, because children born from the Blackthorn bloodline during a blood moon cycle are watched carefully by the council. A chill moved through Lyra even now remembering those words. Watched carefully. The healer's face had become pale afterward. As long as nobody knows they're safe. Safe. That word suddenly carried terrifying weight now. Back inside the dining hall, Celine stood from her chair slowly. Every noble tracked her movement. She approached Kael directly. Too close. Far too close. Then she adjusted something near the Alpha's collar while speaking softly enough that most of the room couldn't hear. But Lyra could. Your council grows impatient. Kael's jaw tightened instantly. Celine smiled slightly. The kingdom already knows she cannot stand beside you forever. Lyra felt her pulse slam violently inside her chest. Because Celine wasn't bluffing anymore. This was happening. Fast. And everyone around them knew it. Everyone except the man standing at the center of it all. Because Kael still believed he had time. Time to manage politics. Time to control the transition. Time to keep Lyra protected from humiliation. He had no idea the damage was already done. Across the hall, Lyra slowly stepped backward away from the royal platform. Away from the whispers. Away from the throne. Her mind was racing now. Not emotionally. Strategically. If the council announced a replacement publicly, they could separate her from the children before birth. If Celine became Luna, the heirs could become threats. And threats inside Alpha Kingdoms rarely survived long. That realization hit hard enough to stop her breathing. For the first time since entering the hall, fear overtook heartbreak. Real fear. Because this was bigger than rejection now. This was survival. At the royal platform, Kael suddenly turned as if sensing movement behind him. His eyes searched the room. For a brief moment, They landed on Lyra again. But this time, she saw something strange in his expression. Concern. Tiny. Almost invisible. But there. As if some part of the mate bond was beginning to react too late. Because deep inside him, something already knew. Something already felt her pulling away. And that terrified him more than he understood. Lyra lowered her gaze immediately. Then, quietly, carefully, she walked out of the dining hall without saying a word. Nobody stopped her. Nobody followed her. But high above Blackthorn Castle, dark clouds were gathering across the mountains once again. And somewhere deep inside the kingdom, a dangerous future had already begun moving toward them. Because the Alpha wanted a new Luna, while his true heirs were already growing inside the woman he planned to abandon. By midday, the entire atmosphere inside Blackthorn Castle had changed. Nobody announced anything publicly, but fear travels fast inside Alpha Kingdoms, especially when powerful men begin holding private meetings behind locked doors. The council chamber remained guarded all morning, more guards than usual, twice as many near the western staircases. Servants carrying documents in and out with lowered eyes. Military advisors entering through side corridors. Something serious was happening, and everyone inside the castle could feel it. From the highest noble floor to the servant kitchens underground, people had started whispering the same question. Why was the Moon Council suddenly meeting every day? Inside the war chamber, the answer was already unfolding. A massive map of the northern territories stretched across the stone table beneath candlelight. Red markings covered the southern borders. 3 packs had already stopped paying taxes to Blackthorn. 2 more were threatening open rebellion. And, at the center of the room, Alpha Kael Draven stood silent while the council tore his kingdom apart piece by piece. The southern Alphas no longer trust the throne. An elder slammed his hand against the table. They see weakness. Another council member pointed directly toward the map. The eastern military routes are collapsing, and Celine Morvatha's family controls half those routes. That sentence shifted the entire room, because this was never truly about love. It was about power, military power, bloodline power, political survival. One of the oldest elders leaned forward slowly. Marrying Celine secures the Eastern Alliance immediately. Kael's expression darkened. But he didn't argue. That silence encouraged the others. Another council member stepped closer. The people already expected her to become Luna years ago. And Lyra? The room quieted instantly after that question. A long pause followed. Kael stared at the war map, without moving. One elder finally answered for him. Lyra's presence weakens negotiations. Another added, she inspires sympathy, not strength. Then came the sentence that revealed how deep the conspiracy truly went. The rumors have already spread across the southern territories. Kael finally looked up sharply. What rumors? The elder hesitated. Only briefly. Then answered carefully. That your Luna cannot produce heirs. A dangerous silence filled the chamber. Because Kael knew immediately what that meant. Someone inside Blackthorn had been feeding information to rival packs. Private information. Royal information, and there was only one person bold enough to benefit from it, Celine. Meanwhile, several floors below the council chamber, Celine Morvatha sat comfortably inside the eastern lounge surrounded by noble women. Tea rested untouched beside her, while soft laughter echoed through the room. The conversation sounded casual, but every sentence carried poison. I heard the Luna fainted recently. Another woman sighed dramatically. The moon goddess sometimes warns kingdoms before weak bloodlines collapse. More quiet laughter. Celine lowered her eyes modestly before speaking. The Luna has always looked fragile. The women around her immediately agreed, because Celine had spent months preparing this moment carefully. Every rumor inside Blackthorn carried her fingerprints. Weak. Infertile. Emotionally unstable. Cursed bloodline. The whispers had started small. Then spread through servants, then nobles, then military houses. And now, the entire kingdom questioned the Luna openly. Even worse, many already accepted her replacement before it officially happened. That was Celine's real talent. She never attacked directly. She made entire kingdoms destroy people for her. Back upstairs, the council meeting grew more dangerous. A military advisor stepped forward carrying sealed letters. These arrived from the southern pacts this morning. He placed them before Kael carefully. Kael opened the first letter. His jaw tightened immediately. The second letter made his expression darker. By the third, the entire room understood the situation was worse than expected. One elder spoke quietly. They're demanding proof Blackthorn remains politically stable. Another finished the sentence for him. They want a stronger Luna. Kael placed the letters down slowly. The room watched him carefully now. Because this was the moment. The moment the Alpha either protected his mate or sacrificed her for the throne. Outside the chamber doors, Beta Daemon stood listening silently. Unlike the council, Daemon knew Lyra personally. He had watched her spend years trying to earn affection inside a castle that barely noticed her suffering. He had watched Kael become colder month after month. And now, he was watching the kingdom prepare to erase her completely. Inside the chamber, another elder finally said it openly. The replacement ceremony should happen before winter. No hesitation this time. No careful wording. Replacement. Like Lyra was already gone. Kael closed his eyes briefly. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then he spoke. Celene's alliance would stop the rebellion. The council immediately relaxed, because they finally had his cooperation. An elder nodded slowly. The kingdom survives. Kael remained silent after that. But deep down, something inside him was already resisting. He just didn't understand it yet, because emotionally, Kael had made a fatal mistake years earlier. He convinced himself that duty and love could survive separately. Now both were collapsing at the same time. Down in the servant corridors, the whispers were spreading even faster. Lyra heard them before anyone noticed she was there. 2 maids stood near the laundry hall folding royal linens. The replacement ceremony may happen before winter. The second servant gasped softly. So soon. The council already chose Selene. Lyra stopped walking instantly. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. One servant lowered her voice further. They say the Luna won't remain inside Blackthorn afterward. The other maid looked frightened. Where would she go? A long pause followed. Then came the answer that made Lyra's stomach tighten painfully. Women removed from alpha houses rarely keep protection. Silence. Heavy silence. Because everyone inside werewolf kingdoms understood what that meant. A Luna, without political protection, became vulnerable immediately. Enemies. Rival packs. Assassins. And if Lyra carried heirs, the danger multiplied. The servants finally noticed her standing nearby. Both women turned pale instantly. My Luna, Lyra walked away before they could finish. Fast. Her breathing uneven now, because the situation had become terrifyingly clear. The council wasn't discussing possibilities anymore. They were discussing timelines. Somewhere behind her, castle bells echoed through the corridors. Council session ending. At the same moment, Kael exited the war chamber with Beta Daemon following closely behind. The hallway remained empty except for guards posted near the windows. Kael looked exhausted. Not physically. Mentally. Like the pressure around him was finally becoming impossible to ignore. Daemon studied him carefully before speaking. You're actually considering this. Kael kept walking. The southern territories are close to rebellion. That's not what I asked. Kael stopped near the staircase overlooking the lower courtyard. Rain clouds gathered heavily over the mountains again. The kingdom comes first. Daemon stared at him in disbelief. Because those 4 words sounded logical, reasonable, responsible. But Daemon knew what Kael refused to admit. This was no longer just politics. This was cowardice. Kael had spent years hiding behind duty because facing Lyra emotionally terrified him more than war ever could. Daemon stepped closer carefully. And what happens to Lyra? Kael said nothing. That silence answered everything. And somewhere else inside Blackthorn Castle, Lyra Vale stood alone in her chambers with one trembling hand resting over her stomach. Because for the first time since hearing the council discussion, another terrifying realization entered her mind. The danger was no longer coming. It had already arrived. Night fell heavily over Blackthorn Castle. Rain returned after sunset. Harder this time. Wind slammed against the high tower windows while guards tightened their cloaks along the outer walls. Inside the castle, candles flickered through dark corridors where servants moved quietly, careful not to attract attention. Because something inside Blackthorn had shifted. The tension was no longer hidden.
People felt it now.
The servants whispered less loudly. The guards avoided eye contact. Even the nobles moved carefully through the halls as if the castle itself had become unstable. And, at the center of it all, Lyra Vale finally stopped crying. That frightened her more than the betrayal. Because for days, her chest had felt heavy enough to crush her.
But now,
she felt strangely calm. A dangerous kind of calm. The kind people reach right before walking away forever. Inside her chambers, candlelight moved softly across packed bags, sitting near the bed.
small bags.
Only essentials. A dark cloak. A few coins. Medical herbs from the healer. And hidden carefully beneath folded fabric, the first tiny pair of knitted infant gloves Lyra bought secretly that morning. Her fingers trembled slightly touching them.
Twins.
Kael still had no idea. Outside her chamber doors, footsteps approached slowly. Heavy. Familiar. Lyra looked toward the entrance immediately.
Kael.
For one brief second, instinct almost betrayed her. The same instinct that spent years hoping every conversation between them would finally become honest. But tonight felt different. Because she already knew the truth before he entered the room. The chamber doors opened. Kael stepped inside quietly, rainwater still darkening the shoulders of his coat. His expression looked exhausted, like the kingdom was crushing him piece by piece. But Lyra noticed something else immediately. He still had council documents in his hand. Even now, even after everything, politics came into their room before love ever did. The doors closed behind him. Silence filled the chamber instantly. No anger, no shouting. Only two people standing inside a marriage that had been dying slowly for years. Kael finally looked toward her fully, and the moment his eyes met hers, something about her expression unsettled him immediately. Because Lyra was no longer waiting for comfort. No tears. No desperate hope. Just exhaustion. Deep emotional exhaustion. Kael stepped forward carefully. You left dinner early. Lyra said nothing. Another silence. The storm outside crashed against the castle walls again. Kael loosened his gloves slowly. There's tension inside the council right now. Still nothing from her. That made him uneasy. Because Lyra usually tried to ease conflict. Tried to protect peace between them. Tried to make conversations easier. Tonight, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff deciding whether to jump. Kael took another step closer. Lyra. Her voice finally came quietly. Flat. Controlled. Did you choose her already? Kael froze instantly. The room became completely still. Even the storm outside suddenly sounded distant. Because he understood immediately. She knew. Every muscle in his body tightened. Who told you? Lyra looked down briefly before answering. I heard the council. Kael's expression changed immediately. Concern. Shock.
Guilt.
But the damage had already happened. He moved toward her quickly. You shouldn't have heard that conversation. The moment those words left his mouth, something inside Lyra cracked further. Because even now, he spoke about the meeting itself. Not her pain. Not the betrayal. The conversation. She looked at him slowly. Eyes glassy under candlelight. Was any of it untrue? Kael opened his mouth. Then stopped. That hesitation lasted only seconds. But heartbreak measures time differently. To Lyra, those few seconds felt endless. Because during that silence, she watched him decide between honesty and comfort. And the worst part? He couldn't give her either. Kael finally exhaled heavily. The council is pressuring me. Lyra nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already knew. And Celine? Kael's jaw tightened. Another dangerous silence. That answer was enough too. The room suddenly felt smaller. Harder to breathe inside. Lyra looked away first. Toward the fireplace. Toward the rain-covered windows. anywhere except him. Because the man she spent years loving suddenly felt emotionally unreachable. And somewhere deep down, she understood something terrifying. Kael never truly noticed how lonely she had become beside him. He noticed political instability, military pressure, council tension, but not her. Never her. Her voice came softer this time, more painful. Did you ever love me? Kael looked up immediately. Or was I just useful? The question landed harder than any accusation ever could. Because Kael had prepared himself for anger, prepared for tears, prepared for confrontation. He wasn't prepared for honesty. Real honesty. The kind that strips every excuse away. For the first time that night, Kael looked shaken. Actually shaken. His eyes searched hers desperately now, as if realizing too late how close he was to losing something important. You were never just useful. Lyra waited. And that became the problem. Because she was waiting for the words he could not say fast enough. I loved you. I chose you. I would choose you again. But Kael hesitated. Again. Always too long. And inside that hesitation, Lyra finally saw the truth clearly. A man in love would never need this much time. Her breathing became uneven. Not dramatic. Quietly painful. Like someone trying to survive hearing the answer before it's spoken aloud. Kael stepped closer. I never meant to hurt you. The moment he said it, Lyra's expression changed completely. Because that was the wrong answer. Completely wrong. She didn't ask whether he intended pain. She asked whether he loved her. And somehow, he still avoided it. That realization destroyed the final piece of hope she carried. The silence afterward became unbearable. Kael felt it too. For the first time in years, genuine panic began moving underneath his calm exterior. Because something about Lyra felt distant now. Not physically. Emotionally. Like she was already leaving him while standing right in front of him. He reached for her hand instinctively. Lyra stepped back immediately. Small movement. Devastating impact. Kael froze. Because she had never pulled away from him before. Ever. Rain exploded against the windows again. Thunder rolled across the mountains surrounding Blackthorn territory. And somewhere deep inside the mate bond connecting them, something started tearing. Lyra looked at him one final time. No hatred. That frightened Kael more. Hatred meant emotion remained. But this looked like surrender. Like exhaustion finally replacing love. Her next words barely rose above a whisper. I kept waiting for you to choose me. Kael's chest tightened violently. Because he suddenly realized she was speaking in past tense. Waited. Not waiting. Waited. A horrifying feeling moved through him instantly. Like standing seconds before disaster, while understanding absolutely nothing. He stepped toward her again. Lyra. But she turned away before he could finish. Conversation over.
Just like that.
No screaming. No dramatic ending. Only silence heavy enough to bury a marriage completely. Kael stood motionless behind her, watching the woman he married slowly disappear emotionally right in front of him. And for the first time, fear entered his chest. Real fear. Because some instinct deep inside him suddenly whispered something dangerous. If she walked away tonight, she might never come back. Minutes later, Kael finally left the chamber quietly. The doors closed behind him with a soft echo. Lyra remained standing near the fireplace without moving. Then slowly, very slowly, she placed one trembling hand over her stomach.
Twins.
His children. Their children. And suddenly one thought became painfully clear. If she stayed inside Blackthorn Castle, her children would grow up surrounded by the same silence that destroyed her. That realization made the decision for her. Outside, midnight bells echoed through the kingdom. Servants disappeared into sleeping quarters. Guards rotated shifts along the walls. Candles dimmed throughout the castle one by one. And deep inside her chambers, Lyra Vale quietly opened the hidden bag beside her bed. Because that night, while the entire castle slept, the Luna disappeared. Midnight swallowed Blackthorn Castle completely. Most of the torches along the eastern halls had already burned low. Rainwater dripped from the stone gargoyles outside the castle walls while distant thunder rolled across the mountains again. Inside her chambers, Lyra moved fast. Every second mattered now. Her hands shook while tightening the straps of the small leather bag across her shoulder. She packed almost nothing. A dark traveling cloak. Coins stolen from her own emergency drawer. Medical herbs wrapped carefully in cloth. A water flask. And hidden beneath everything else, the tiny infant gloves. The room around her looked painfully untouched. The royal bed still perfectly made on Kael's side. The fireplace dim. The curtains moving gently from cold wind leaking through the windows. It looked like a room waiting for people who stopped loving each other a long time ago. Then, suddenly, footsteps outside the chamber. Lyra froze instantly. Heavy boots. 2 guards. Passing slowly. She held her breath completely. The footsteps stopped directly outside her door. Silence. One of the guards spoke quietly. The Alpha ordered extra patrols tonight. Another answered. You think the rebels crossed the border already?
No.
Something else is happening. Lyra's pulse slammed against her chest. Because if Kael increased patrols across the castle, escaping became nearly impossible. The guards finally continued down the hallway. Lyra exhaled sharply, then moved immediately. She pulled the dark hood over her hair and crossed the chamber toward the bookshelf near the western wall. Her fingers searched behind old leather-bound records until they found cold iron hidden beneath the wood.
Click.
The shelf shifted slowly. A narrow servant tunnel opened behind it. Darkness waited below. Blackthorn Castle was filled with hidden passageways built centuries earlier during old pack wars. Emergency escape routes. Spy corridors. Servant tunnels connecting every major wing of the castle. Very few nobles still remembered they existed. Lyra stepped inside carefully and pulled the shelf closed behind her. Complete darkness swallowed her instantly. Only the sound of her breathing remained. Then, another sound. Movement somewhere deeper inside the tunnel. Lyra stopped immediately, her pulse rising again. Someone else was down there. A faint lantern glow suddenly appeared farther ahead. Too late to hide. Lyra stepped backward carefully, then froze again when a low voice emerged from the darkness. Keep moving. Male voice.
Quiet.
Covered by shadow. Lyra's breathing caught instantly. The figure stepped partially into lantern light. Black cloak.
Gloves.
Face hidden beneath hood. She couldn't recognize him, but he clearly recognized her. The Eastern Guards changed routes 10 minutes ago, he whispered quickly. If you stay here, they'll find you. Lyra stared at him in stunned silence. Who was this? Why was he helping her? The stranger stepped aside toward another narrow tunnel passage. Hurry. Lyra hesitated. Danger pressed from every direction now. Trusting the wrong person could destroy everything. But staying inside Blackthorn Castle guaranteed disaster. Another sound echoed through the tunnels behind them. Voices.
Guards. Closer now.
The stranger looked toward the sound immediately, then back at Lyra. They're already searching this section. That sentence hit hard. Searching? For her? Or something else? Lyra tightened her grip on the bag's strap and moved.
Fast.
The stranger led her deeper underground through narrow stone corridors barely wide enough for one person at a time. Water dripped steadily from cracked ceilings. Ancient torches burned low along forgotten walls. The deeper they moved, the colder the tunnels became. Above them, Blackthorn Castle slept completely unaware that its Luna was vanishing beneath its foundations. Suddenly, the stranger stopped sharply near an iron gate. He reached into his cloak and unlocked it quickly. Lyra's suspicion deepened immediately. Only high-ranking castle members possessed keys to restricted tunnels. Whoever this man was, he belonged inside Blackthorn. Another sound echoed faintly above them.
Wolves.
Tracking wolves. Lyra's stomach tightened instantly, because Blackthorn hunting wolves were trained to follow scent across miles. If Kael ordered a search by dawn, they would eventually track her. The stranger opened the gate fully. This tunnel exits beyond the western forest. Lyra looked toward the opening. Cold wind rushed through from outside somewhere ahead. Freedom.
So close now.
Then the stranger suddenly grabbed her wrist gently. Lyra reacted instantly, pulling back in alarm. But his voice came low and urgent. "You can't travel through the northern roads." She stared at him carefully. "How do you know where I'm going?" The hooded figure remained silent for one dangerous second, then answered quietly. "Because if the council discovers you're pregnant before sunrise, they'll never let you leave alive." Lyra's blood ran cold. He knew. Whoever he was, he knew about the twins. Her hand instinctively moved protectively toward her stomach. The stranger noticed immediately, then stepped backward again. "You need to disappear before the castle realizes you're gone."
Gone.
The word echoed heavily inside the tunnel, because suddenly this all felt terrifyingly real. She was truly leaving. Leaving Blackthorn. Leaving her title. Leaving Kael. Possibly forever. The stranger lowered his voice again. "Once you cross the western cliffs, avoid every marked road. Trust nobody wearing Blackthorn colors." Lyra searched his hidden face desperately. "Who are you?" The lantern flame flickered violently between them. Then the stranger answered. "Someone who knows what happens to unwanted heirs inside Alpha Kingdoms." A distant howl exploded outside the tunnels. Closer this time. The tracking wolves had already started moving. The stranger stepped back into shadow immediately. "You need to go." Lyra hesitated one final second, then turned toward the tunnel exit. Cold rain hit her face almost instantly as she emerged into the forest beyond Blackthorn's outer walls. Massive pine trees swayed violently under the storm. The castle towers loomed behind her through darkness. Beautiful.
Cold. Dead.
For years, Lyra begged that place to love her back. Tonight, she finally stopped. Her hand slowly reached toward the silver Luna ring resting on her finger. The symbol of her mating bond. The symbol of loyalty. The symbol of a marriage already broken long before this night. Rainwater slid across her trembling hand as she removed it carefully. For a moment, she simply stared at the ring silently. Memories crashed into her all at once. Her mating ceremony, Kael holding her hand, the promises, the hope, the years she spent trying to become enough for him. Then quietly, Lyra placed the ring onto a flat stone beside the tunnel entrance and walked away, without looking back. Deep inside Blackthorn Castle, the night continued normally for several more hours. Guards rotated shifts. Council candles burned low. Servants slept. And Alpha Kael Draven remained inside his private study staring at military reports he could no longer focus on. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. The mate bond had become strangely quiet. Cold. Uneasy. Several times, Kael looked instinctively toward the chamber hallway as if expecting Lyra to appear. She never did. Near dawn, exhaustion finally dragged him from the study. He walked through the silent castle corridors toward their chambers while thunder faded across distant mountains. The doors opened slowly. Dark room. Cold fireplace. Silence. Kael immediately noticed the bed. Empty. His expression changed instantly. "Lyra?" No answer. He crossed the room quickly now. Bathroom empty. Balcony empty. Closet partially open. Then he saw it. The missing clothes. The open drawer. The empty jewelry stand. His pulse slammed violently. Guards. No response yet. Kael moved faster through the room now, panic rising visibly for the first time. Then suddenly, his foot stopped. Something dark stained the floor beside the bed.
Blood. Fresh.
Kael froze completely. The room became deathly silent. His breathing stopped, because in that horrifying moment, his mind went somewhere far worse than abandonment. Someone took her. Or worse, someone killed her before she could escape Blackthorn alive. The moment Alpha Kael Draven saw the blood beside the bed, Blackthorn Castle exploded into chaos. Guards flooded the royal corridor within seconds. Torches lit across every hallway. Steel doors slammed open throughout the fortress, while commanders barked orders loud enough to wake the entire eastern wing. Kael stood frozen in the center of the chamber while rain pounded against the windows behind him.
Blood.
Still wet. Too much for a simple cut. His mind moved instantly toward violence. Attack.
Kidnapping.
Assassination. The thought of Lyra injured somewhere beyond the castle walls hit him harder than he expected. A guard rushed into the room. "My Alpha. Seal the gates." Kael's voice came sharp enough to silence everyone instantly. "No one enters or leaves Blackthorn territory." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. That order had only been used during wartime. Kael stepped away from the blood slowly, eyes darkening with every second. "Wake every tracker." Another guard hesitated. "My Alpha, if the council discovers." Kael turned so fast the man immediately went silent. "I said wake them." Within minutes, massive alarm bells echoed across the kingdom.
Deep.
Violent. Relentless. The sound rolled through Blackthorn territory like a warning of war. Villages lit torches. Border guards armed themselves. Tracking wolves were dragged from holding pens beneath the fortress. And through all of it, one terrifying truth spread quickly through the castle. The Luna was missing. Inside the royal chamber, Beta Daemon crouched beside the bloodstain carefully. His expression grew darker the longer he studied it. Kael paced violently near the fireplace. She wouldn't leave willingly. Daemon looked up slowly, but he said nothing, because deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Kael suddenly grabbed the edge of the nearby table hard enough to crack the wood. "Search every tunnel beneath this castle." Guards rushed immediately to obey. Panic had already begun swallowing him whole. Not political panic. Personal panic. The kind that arrives when someone realizes too late that losing a person hurts differently than losing power. Outside, the tracking wolves released long, violent howls into the storm before racing beyond the outer walls. The hunt had started, and Kael looked absolutely terrified. Several floors below, servants gathered secretly inside the lower kitchens, whispering over each new rumor spreading through Blackthorn. They found blood in the Luna's chambers. They say rogues crossed the northern forest. I heard she was taken before dawn. Fear spread fast, because if enemies successfully kidnapped a Luna from inside Blackthorn Castle, the kingdom itself looked weak. And weak kingdoms attracted predators. Meanwhile, inside her private chambers, Celine Morvith stared at her reflection calmly while a servant brushed her hair. At first, she smiled, very slightly, because Lyra's disappearance solved everything faster than expected. No public humiliation. No political resistance. No emotional confrontation. The Luna simply vanished.
Perfect.
But then the castle bells kept ringing. Again. 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 Too long. Celine slowly noticed something changing in the atmosphere around her. The guards outside sounded panicked. The servants looked frightened. And most importantly, Kael had not called for her. That bothered her immediately. A knock hit her chamber doors. One of her family advisors entered quickly. "Blackthorn is locked down." Celine frowned. "For a missing Luna?" The advisor hesitated carefully.
"No."
He swallowed hard. "For Alpha Kael." That answer changed everything, because suddenly Celine understood something dangerous. Kael wasn't reacting like a ruler managing political damage. He was reacting like a man losing someone he could not survive without. Inside the royal war chamber, military commanders crowded around massive territory maps, while storm winds rattled the windows violently. Kael stood at the center, issuing orders faster than anyone could record them. Close the southern crossings. Double patrols along Frostfang Ridge. Search every abandoned settlement north of the river. One commander looked stunned. "My Alpha, if rival packs notice the scale of response." Kael slammed both hands against the war table. "I don't care." The room fell silent immediately, because everyone inside finally saw it. The Alpha was unraveling. Daemon watched carefully from nearby. He had known Kael for years. Fought beside him. Bled beside him. He had never seen fear look like this before. A guard suddenly rushed into the chamber, breathing heavily. "My Alpha, we found this near the western cliffs." The guard held out something silver. Kael recognized it instantly. The Luna ring. Rain-soaked.
Cold.
Abandoned on stone. The entire room became silent. Kael took the ring slowly. His hand tightened around it hard enough to cut his palm. Because that ring meant something terrifying. Lyra removed it willingly. She chose to leave him. That realization hit harder than the blood ever did. For years, Kael convinced himself Lyra would always remain beside him no matter how distant he became. Now the truth stood directly in front of him. She finally gave up, and he had no idea how to undo that. Hours passed. Search parties returned empty. Tracking wolves lost her scent near the western cliffs where heavy rain destroyed the trail. The farther the day stretched, the worse Kael became. He stopped answering council questions, stopped reading military reports. Several times, servants found him standing silently inside Lyra's empty chambers, staring at the untouched fireplace like a man trying to understand how his entire life collapsed overnight. Then came the moment that destroyed him completely. Late afternoon, the healer requested immediate audience. The elderly woman entered the chamber, trembling visibly. Kael looked exhausted already, dark circles beneath his eyes, blood still staining his cuff from gripping the Luna ring too tightly. "What is it?" The healer glanced nervously toward the guards nearby, then lowered her voice carefully. "My Alpha, there is something you need to know about your Luna." Kael looked up immediately.
Hope. Fear.
Desperation. All at once. The healer's hands shook harder now. "She came to see me yesterday morning." Kael stepped closer instantly. "Why?" The healer hesitated. "Only 1 second. Then she whispered, 'Your Luna was pregnant.'" Silence. Absolute silence. The entire room stopped breathing. Kael stared at her without moving, like his mind physically refused to process the words. Pregnant. Lyra was pregnant. A horrifying realization slammed into him instantly. The council called her weak, while she carried his heirs. The kingdom planned to replace her, while she carried his bloodline. And worst of all, she left believing he didn't love her. Kael stepped backward slowly, his face drained of color. When? The healer lowered her eyes. She was carrying twins. Twins. The word shattered something inside him completely. Twins. His children. Out there somewhere beyond the kingdom. Alone. Cold. Unprotected. His knees nearly gave out. Damon moved immediately, grabbing his arm before he collapsed fully. Kael shoved him away violently. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" The roar echoed through the chamber, hard enough to shake the walls. The healer looked terrified now. She begged for secrecy. Kael's breathing turned uneven. Fast. Dangerous. Because every memory from the previous night suddenly replayed differently inside his mind. Lyra standing quietly in their chambers. Her trembling hands. Her exhausted eyes. The question she asked him. "Did you ever love me, or was I just useful?" And his answer. Moon Goddess. His answer. Kael covered his mouth briefly, like he might be physically sick. Because he understood now what she heard beneath his silence. Rejection. Complete rejection. A guard suddenly entered the chamber quickly. "My Alpha, one of the northern scouts, found signs of movement beyond Frostfang Ridge." Kael turned instantly. Was it her? The scout hesitated. "We found blood in the snow." Kael's entire body went still again. Blood. More blood. And suddenly every terrible possibility crashed into him all at once. She was pregnant. Traveling alone. Crossing winter territory. Hunted by wolves. Possibly injured. Kael grabbed his sword immediately. Damon stepped forward fast. "You can't leave the kingdom yourself." "I'm going." "My Alpha, the Southern Rebellion." Kael looked at him with something close to fury. "I let my Luna walk into a storm carrying my children." The room fell completely silent. Because for the first time since Lyra disappeared, Kael finally said the truth out loud. "My Luna. My children." Too late. Far beyond the northern borders. Beneath violent snowfall and freezing winds, Lyra Vale collapsed alone in the snow. Snow buried the northern wilderness faster than Lyra could walk through it. By nightfall, the storm had become deadly. Wind ripped through the Frostfang Mountains hard enough to bend entire trees. Thick snow swallowed the narrow paths beneath her boots, while freezing air burned her lungs with every breath. And somewhere far behind her, Blackthorn hunters were still searching. Lyra stumbled down a steep ridge, one trembling hand wrapped protectively across her stomach beneath the heavy cloak.
Twins.
Every painful step reminded her they were there.
Alive.
Depending on her. That thought kept her moving long after her body started failing. Hours earlier, she crossed the western cliffs before dawn. Since then, she had barely stopped walking. No proper shelter. No fire. No food. Only snow. Endless snow. The forest around her felt wrong now. Too quiet. Predators usually filled northern forests with sound. Howls. Movement. Branches cracking. But tonight, the silence carried danger. Lyra slowed immediately. Her instincts reacted first. Someone was nearby. A sharp crunch echoed behind her. Then another. Heavy footsteps. Large. Closing in slowly. Lyra turned sharply toward the trees. Nothing. Only darkness moving between snow-covered branches. Her pulse climbed instantly. She reached for the small dagger hidden beneath her cloak. The weapon looked painfully useless against whatever followed her through that forest. Another sound. Closer this time. Low breathing. Animal breathing. Then finally,
Eyes.
golden eyes appearing one by one between the trees. Rogue wolves. 5 of them. Massive.
Starving.
Watching her carefully, Lyra stepped backward slowly. The wolves spread out immediately. Hunting formation. They already knew she was weak. One wolf moved closer first, growling low enough to vibrate through the snow beneath her feet. Lyra tightened her grip on the dagger. Fear surged through her chest instantly. Because fighting wasn't the real problem anymore. Running was. Every movement exhausted her faster now. The children were draining her strength. The largest wolf suddenly lunged. Lyra reacted instantly, stumbling sideways through deep snow while slashing wildly with the dagger. The blade caught fur. The wolf roared violently. Another attacked from the left. Lyra screamed as claws ripped across her shoulder, hard enough to spin her into the snow. Pain exploded through her body. The dagger disappeared beneath the storm. One thought hit her instantly. The twins. Her hands moved protectively over her stomach before she even tried standing again. The wolves circled closer. Faster now. Excited. Blood stained the snow beneath her shoulder, while freezing wine tore through the trees around them. Lyra struggled backward desperately. One wolf crouched low, preparing to leap directly for her throat. Then suddenly, a louder growl shattered the forest. Everything stopped. The rogue wolves froze instantly. A massive figure emerged from the darkness between the trees.
Tall.
Broad shoulders. Heavy black coat soaked with snow. The stranger moved slowly toward the wolves without fear. And the moment the rogues recognized him, their entire behavior changed. Ears lowered.
Tails stiff.
Uneasy.
Alpha.
A rogue alpha. The man's voice came low and dangerous. Leave. The wolves hesitated. One growled again weakly. The stranger stepped forward once. That was enough. The rogues retreated immediately into the storm one by one until darkness swallowed them completely. Silence returned. Only harsh wind remained. Lyra tried standing again. Her legs failed instantly. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground. Strong grip.
Steady.
Lyra reacted immediately, trying to pull away despite exhaustion. Don't touch me. The alpha looked down at her carefully. You're bleeding. His voice sounded rough. Controlled. Like someone used to surviving alone. Lyra's breathing remained uneven. She studied him quickly through the storm. Dark hair dusted with snow. Scar across his jaw. Silver gray eyes unusually calm despite the situation. Dangerous man. Definitely rogue. But his scent carried something unexpected. Control. Most rogue alphas radiated violence. This one radiated restraint. The stranger looked toward the blood spreading across the snow. Then toward the northern sky beyond the forest. Blackthorn hunters are already moving through the lower ridges. Lyra's chest tightened instantly. How do you know that? The alpha looked back at her. Because I've been watching them all day. That answer raised immediate alarm. Lyra forced herself backward another step. Who are you? The man hesitated briefly, then answered. Rowan. No title. No pack name. Just Rowan. The storm intensified around them again. Snow whipped violently through the trees while Lyra's knees nearly gave out a second time. Rowan noticed immediately. You won't survive another hour out here. Lyra looked away sharply. I'll survive. But even saying the words sounded weak now. Rowan's gaze lowered slowly toward her stomach beneath the cloak. His expression shifted instantly, very slightly, as if noticing something strange. Lyra stepped back immediately, fear rising again. What? Rowan didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched slowly near the snow where she had fallen moments earlier. Blood stained the white ground beneath them, but mixed inside the blood, something else shimmered faintly beneath the storm. Silver. Rowan stared at it carefully, then looked back toward Lyra. His eyes sharper now, more alert. What are you carrying? The question hit hard. Lyra's hand moved protectively over her stomach instantly. Rowan noticed, and suddenly, his entire posture changed, because underneath the fabric covering her abdomen, something faintly glowed. Silver markings. Thin glowing lines spreading slowly beneath her skin like ancient symbols, waking up one by one. Lyra looked down in shock. The marks hadn't appeared before. Her breathing caught instantly. What is that? The silver glow pulsed again.
Soft. Alive.
Then disappeared beneath her skin. The entire forest suddenly felt colder. Rowan stood completely still now, staring at her with open disbelief. Because he recognized those markings. Ancient alpha markings. The kind hidden inside old northern legends. Stories most kingdoms stopped speaking about generations earlier. A violent howl suddenly echoed somewhere far beyond the ridge. Tracking wolves.
Closer now.
Rowan snapped toward the sound immediately. They found your trail. Lyra's pulse spiked violently. Blackthorn hunters. Already this close. The storm would not hide her much longer. Rowan looked back at her again. This time differently. Like he was no longer seeing a runaway Luna. He was seeing something far more dangerous. Far more important. The silver markings beneath Lyra's skin flashed one more time beneath the storm. And Rowan whispered quietly, "Those children are not ordinary heirs." 3 days after Lyra disappeared, Blackthorn Kingdom stopped feeling stable. The change spread slowly at first. Missed military reports. Delayed border patrols. Council meetings stretching long past midnight. Then came the challenges. One rival Alpha refused to send taxes. Another closed northern trade routes without permission. By the 4th day, southern pacts openly questioned Kael's authority. And everyone inside the kingdom understood why. The Luna vanished. The Alpha lost control. Powerful kingdoms smell weakness quickly. Inside the Blackthorn war chamber, tension poisoned the air. Massive territory maps covered the stone walls while council members argued loudly around the central table. The Eastern pacts are already preparing military responses. A second elder slammed documents onto the table. The kingdom looks unstable. Another voice cut through immediately. Because the Luna vanished from inside the royal castle. Kael sat at the head of the chamber completely silent. Dark circles beneath his eyes. Jaw clenched tightly. Bloodshot gaze fixed on nothing. He looked exhausted. More than exhausted. Haunted. One council member stepped forward carefully. My Alpha. The neighboring territories are demanding explanations. Kael didn't answer. Because his mind wasn't inside the war chamber anymore. It was somewhere far north in the snow. With Lyra.
Cold.
Bleeding.
Pregnant.
The same thoughts replayed endlessly inside his head now.
Did she eat?
Did she find shelter? Was she injured? Were the twins alive? Twins. Every time the word entered his mind, guilt hit harder. Because suddenly, every moment between them looked different. Every lonely dinner. Every ignored conversation. Every silence. He remembered the way Lyra used to look at him years earlier. Hopeful. Patient. Still trying. And he remembered exactly when that look disappeared. He just never stopped it. A council elder's voice dragged him back sharply. We need immediate political stabilization. Another added, Celine Morvatha's alliance remains the strongest option. Kael's eyes finally lifted slowly. The room quieted instantly. because there was something dangerous in his expression now. Something colder than anger. "Stop talking about replacing my Luna." Silence crashed across the chamber. The council exchanged stunned looks immediately, because that was the first time Kael publicly called Lyra his Luna since her disappearance. One elder spoke carefully. "My Alpha, the kingdom requires practical decisions." Kael stood suddenly. The chair behind him scraped violently against stone. "She is still my mate." The room became deadly quiet. And somewhere deep inside the chamber, Celine Morvith watched everything carefully. Her expression remained calm, but inside, panic had started growing, because Kael's behavior was changing rapidly. At first, Lyra disappearing looked useful. Now it looked dangerous. Very dangerous. Kael had stopped listening to strategy entirely. Every discussion became about the search. Every meeting ended with him demanding updates about Lyra. And worst of all, the mate bond was destroying him. Late that night, Kael stood alone on the balcony outside his chambers while freezing wine tore through the castle towers. His wolf refused to settle. The bond between him and Lyra felt wrong now. Agitated, painful, violently unstable. Several times over the last 2 nights, Kael attempted shifting. Each time failed. His wolf fought him aggressively from inside, because instinct already understood what Kael was only beginning to realize. His mate left emotionally long before she vanished physically. And now the separation was tearing through the bond itself. Kael gripped the balcony railing hard enough to crack the stone. Then suddenly,
Pain.
sharp, violent. The mate bond pulsed through his chest so hard he nearly dropped to one knee. His breathing became uneven immediately. Something was happening to Lyra. Far away, cold fear spread through him instantly. Inside the corridor behind him, Beta Damon approached quietly. "You need sleep." Kael laughed once.
Dry.
Exhausted. "I close my eyes and see her leaving." Damon remained silent. Kael stared out toward the dark mountains again. "I replay everything." His voice lowered. "The council meetings. The dinners. The way she looked at me." Pain moved visibly across his face now. "Moon goddess." His hand tightened against the railing. "She asked if I loved her." The words barely came out, because now he understood the real horror. Lyra gave him one final chance to stop her from breaking completely. And he failed. Kael closed his eyes briefly, then whispered, "I watched her give up on me in real time." Behind him, Damon's expression darkened, because regret had officially become obsession. Kael no longer cared about appearances, no longer cared about politics. Only Lyra, finding her, protecting her, fixing something already shattered. And that terrified the council. Meanwhile, deep inside the Eastern Tower, Celine held her own private meeting beneath candlelight. 3 nobles stood around her speaking in hushed voices. "The Southern Pacts are losing faith in Kael." A second noble added, "Some already suspect the Luna carried heirs." Celine's head lifted immediately. "What?" The room shifted uneasily. One noble swallowed carefully. "Rumors spread after the healer disappeared from the lower tower yesterday." Celine's expression hardened instantly, because that changed everything. A missing Luna created instability. A missing pregnant Luna carrying Alpha heirs created war. Every rival kingdom would search for those children. Powerful bloodlines meant leverage. Future rulers. Ancient inheritance rights. And if the rumors about silver markings were true, the heirs represented something far bigger than politics. Celine moved toward the window slowly. Storm clouds swallowed the horizon beyond Blackthorn territory. Then she asked quietly, "Who else knows?" The noble hesitated. "Possibly the Southern Pacts already." Celine's pulse quickened immediately, because somebody leaked the truth intentionally. And whoever did it wanted chaos. By morning, the rumors exploded across northern territories. The Luna vanished pregnant. Blackthorn heirs missing. Unknown location. Suddenly, every rival pack started searching. Mercenaries crossed borders. Hunters entered northern forests. Even rogue wolves began tracking movement near Frostfang Ridge. The kingdom was falling apart faster every hour. And Kael felt completely helpless watching it happen. Inside Lyra's abandoned chambers, he stood alone staring at the untouched bed again. The room still smelled faintly like her. That made everything worse. His eyes moved slowly across the chamber. The books she left behind, the half-finished embroidery near the fireplace, the empty place on the table where her Luna ring once rested every night. Tiny details destroyed him now, because, for the first time, he truly saw how much of herself Lyra quietly poured into a marriage that gave her almost nothing back. Kael lowered himself slowly onto the edge of the bed. Then another memory hit him hard. Lyra waiting beside the window during winter dinners, looking toward the door every time footsteps approached, hoping he would come eat with her. Most nights, he never did. Kael covered his face briefly, breathing harder now, because guilt becomes unbearable once love finally arrives too late. Suddenly, violent knocking exploded against the chamber doors. Kael stood instantly. A hunter rushed inside covered in snow and blood, breathing heavily, exhausted. The man dropped to one knee immediately. "My Alpha." Kael stepped forward fast. "Tell me." The hunter looked shaken, deeply shaken, because whatever he saw frightened him. Then finally, "We found traces of her blood." Winter swallowed the northern territories completely by the time Lyra's labor began. Snowstorms buried entire roads overnight. Villages disappeared beneath ice. Even rogue packs stopped traveling after sunset because the frost-fallen wilderness had become too dangerous. But deep beyond the northern ridges, inside an abandoned stone chapel hidden between frozen cliffs, Lyra Vale was fighting to survive. Thunder cracked across the mountains hard enough to shake the ancient walls surrounding her. Wind forced snow through broken stained-glass windows while candle flames trembled violently around the room. And in the center of it all, Lyra screamed. The pain hit harder than anything she imagined. Her entire body shook beneath heavy blankets spread across the chapel floor while blood stained the old fabric beneath her. Rowan knelt beside her immediately. "Breathe." Lyra grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. Another contraction slammed through her body. The storm outside exploded louder at the exact same moment. The entire chapel shook violently. Rowan looked toward the ceiling instantly, because that was no ordinary storm. Something was responding to the children. Hours earlier, Rowan carried Lyra through the frozen wilderness after her fever worsened near the northern cliffs. She barely stayed conscious long enough to reach the abandoned chapel. Now, there was no time left. The twins were coming. And something about the birth terrified Rowan deeply. Ancient instincts kept warning him. The silver markings beneath Lyra's skin had spread farther over the last 2 days. Thin glowing lines across her stomach, her ribs, her wrists. Each contraction made them brighter. Alive somehow, like power waking up beneath her skin. Lightning flashed violently through the shattered chapel windows. For one brief second, Rowan saw the markings clearly. Ancient Alpha symbols. Symbols hidden inside forbidden northern records. His expression darkened immediately, because those markings belonged to bloodlines older than modern Alpha kingdoms. Bloodlines tied to prophecy. Lyra cried out again as another wave of pain ripped through her. The storm answered instantly. Outside the chapel, trees bent violently beneath unnatural wind. Snow spiraled upward instead of falling downward. And far beneath the frozen ground, wolves across the northern wilderness began howling all at once. Rowan heard it immediately. Every wolf in the region reacting together. Fear moved through him fast, because animals sensed power before humans ever did. Lyra's breathing became uneven.
Fast. Weak. Dangerously weak.
Blood continued spreading beneath her while the candles around the chapel flickered harder with every passing minute. Then suddenly, all the flames turned silver. Rowan froze instantly. Every candle in the room now burned with silver fire. No heat, only strange glowing light filling the chapel walls. Lyra looked terrified. "What's happening?" Rowan stared toward her stomach. The silver markings were glowing brightly now beneath her skin, pulsing, moving. Then, another contraction hit. This one violent enough to make Lyra scream so loudly the sound echoed across the mountains outside. At that exact moment, the chapel floor cracked. Stone shattered beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Rowan stood instantly, scanning the room in alarm. The entire building was shaking. Not from thunder. From the children. Far away inside Blackthorn Castle, Kael Draven suddenly dropped to one knee. The mate bond exploded through his chest like fire. Pain slammed through his body violently enough to stop his breathing. The war chamber erupted immediately. My Alpha. Damon rushed toward him while council members stood in shock around the room. Kael grabbed the edge of the table hard enough to splinter the wood. Then suddenly, he felt it. Lyra.
Fear. Pain.
The children. Every emotion crashed through the mate bond all at once. His eyes widened instantly. The heirs. His voice barely came out. Damon crouched beside him quickly. What heirs? Kael looked toward the northern mountains beyond the chamber windows. And somehow, deep inside the bond, he already knew. They're alive. Back in the chapel, Lyra's body arched violently as the first child finally came. A newborn cry shattered through the storm immediately. Then, everything stopped. The wind outside paused. The candles steadied. Even the thunder disappeared for one impossible second. Rowan carefully lifted the child into his arms. And froze. The baby boy opened his eyes instantly.
Silver.
Bright, glowing silver. The entire chapel trembled again. Rowan's pulse slammed hard against his chest. Because newborn wolves were never supposed to open their eyes immediately. Especially not like this. The child stared directly at him silently while silver light flickered beneath his tiny skin. Then suddenly, another contraction hit Lyra. The second child was coming. Faster now. More violently. Lyra screamed again while snow exploded through the broken windows around them. Outside, wolves across the mountains dropped low against the frozen earth, whining in fear. The second child arrived moments later. A girl. Smaller. Quieter. But the moment Rowan lifted her, silver light burst through the chapel. Every candle exploded outward. The stone walls cracked deeper. And both children opened glowing silver eyes at the exact same time. The room shook violently. Bookshelves collapsed. Ancient wolf symbols carved into the chapel walls suddenly illuminated beneath layers of dust. Rowan stared around the room in disbelief. Because the chapel itself was reacting to the twins. Like something ancient had awakened. Then his eyes dropped toward the baby boy again. And his blood ran cold. A mark glowed faintly beneath the child's collarbone. Black crescent shape surrounded by silver lines. Rowan recognized it instantly. Forbidden Alpha mark. Ancient kings once murdered entire bloodlines searching for children born with that symbol. Because according to old northern prophecy, wolves carrying that mark either united kingdoms or destroyed them completely. Lyra looked up weakly through exhaustion. What is it? Rowan couldn't answer immediately. Because fear had finally entered his expression. Real fear. The baby boy suddenly stopped crying. Then slowly, he looked directly toward the storm outside. And every wolf beyond the mountains fell completely silent. Miles away, Alpha Kael collapsed fully against the war chamber floor. The mate bond erupted through him violently enough to shake the room. His wolf howled inside him uncontrollably. Council members backed away in alarm. Because Kael's alpha aura suddenly exploded across the chamber, without warning.
Raw.
Unstable. Terrified. He looked toward the northern wilderness again, with shaking hands. Then whispered, Lyra. At the exact same moment, every alpha across the continent felt it. Kings stopped mid-conversation. Rogue alphas lifted their heads toward the northern sky. Ancient wolves hidden deep in exile territories suddenly became restless. Because something impossible had just entered the world. And the moment the children were born, every alpha on the continent felt it. 5 years later, people across the northern territories still whispered about the night the Blackthorn Luna vanished. But the story changed over time. At first, kingdoms believed she died in the wilderness. Then hunters began disappearing near the Frostfang Mountains. Then entire rogue camps started surviving attacks they should never have survived. And, eventually, a new rumor spread across the continent. A silver-eyed woman was moving through the northern territories protecting wolves nobody else would protect. Rogues. Runaways. Exiled children. Broken packs abandoned by powerful kingdoms. The survivors called her only one thing. The ghost Luna. The rumors sounded impossible at first, until bodies started appearing. Mercenaries sent after rogue children found dead near frozen rivers. Slave traders vanished crossing northern forests. One rival Alpha lost an entire hunting squad after attempting to capture orphan wolf pups near the eastern cliffs. Every survivor told the same story afterward. Silver eyes watching from the storm. A woman dressed in black. And 2 children standing behind her. Inside taverns across northern territories, people lowered their voices whenever speaking about them. Because fear surrounded the story now. Real fear. One hunter sat trembling beside a fire, while snowstorm winds shook the wooden tavern walls outside. I saw the boy myself. The entire table went silent immediately. The hunter swallowed hard. He looked straight at my Alpha.
His voice weakened.
And our wolves refused to move. Another man laughed nervously. Children can't overpower trained Alphas. The hunter slammed his cup down hard. That child isn't normal. Silence spread across the tavern again, because everyone had heard the stories already. The twins. The hidden heirs. The children born during the blood moon storm. Some called them cursed. Others called them royal blood returned from ancient prophecy. But nobody called them weak. Especially the boy. Deep inside the northern wilderness, hidden far beyond marked territories. The truth looked far more dangerous than the rumors. A massive rogue wolf charged violently through the snow-covered forest, snapping chains behind it. Foam covered its jaws. Its eyes burned wild with bloodlust. 3 rogue hunters ran through the trees, desperately trying to stop it. Move! It's heading toward the camp. The wolf lunged suddenly toward a terrified child hiding near a fallen tree. Then, everything stopped. The wolf froze mid-charge instantly. Its entire body locked in place. A small boy stepped slowly from between the trees. Silver eyes glowing faintly beneath the snowfall. 6 years old. And absolutely terrifying. The rogue wolf whimpered immediately. Every hunter nearby backed away instinctively, because the pressure surrounding the child felt wrong. Too powerful. Too ancient. The boy lifted one hand slowly. The massive wolf lowered itself completely onto the frozen ground. Total submission. The surrounding forest became deathly quiet. Then another figure emerged behind him. A little girl. Same silver eyes. Same dark hair. But calmer. Watching everything silently. And finally, she appeared. Lyra Vale stepped through the falling snow dressed entirely in black fur and leather. The northern winds moved through her cloak while silver markings flickered faintly beneath the skin near her wrist. 5 years had changed her completely. The softness was gone. The loneliness. The desperation. The woman who waited beside castle windows hoping her mate would finally choose her.
Gone.
This Lyra looked colder.
Sharper.
Like heartbreak carved something dangerous out of her survival. The rogue hunters lowered their heads immediately when she approached. Not from fear alone. Respect. Real respect. Something Blackthorn Castle never truly gave her. Lyra's eyes moved toward the terrified wolf still frozen before her son. Then toward the boy himself. Kieran. The child looked back immediately. Release him. The pressure inside the forest vanished instantly. The rogue wolf stumbled backward before fleeing into the storm at full speed. One hunter stared at Kieran in visible shock. Because powerful alphas struggled to control rogue wolves. Yet a child just dominated one effortlessly. Lyra noticed the fear immediately. Her expression darkened. Keep your distance from my children. The warning came quietly. That made it worse. Because everyone in the Northern Territories already understood something dangerous about the ghost Luna. She rarely threatened people twice. Far away from the northern wilderness, Blackthorn Kingdom still stood. But barely. The years after Lyra vanished changed Kael Draven permanently. The southern rebellions eventually ended. The council stabilized the borders. Political alliances recovered. Yet none of it mattered. Because Blackthorn's Alpha never truly returned emotionally after losing his Luna. He never accepted another mate, never married Celine, never stopped searching. Inside the royal chambers, Kael stood beside the same balcony where he once waited for Lyra years earlier. Rain hammered the kingdom below, while stacks of investigation reports covered the table behind him. 5 years of searching. 5 years of sightings. False leads. Rumors. Dead ends. And still, he couldn't let go. The mate bond remained alive.
Faint. Distant.
Painful. Enough to torture him daily. Kael barely slept anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same memory. Lyra asking him quietly, "Did you ever love me? Or was I just useful?" That question still followed him everywhere. The worst part? He finally knew the answer now. He loved her.
Completely.
He just realized it after destroying her. A knock hit the chamber doors suddenly. Kael turned immediately. A spy entered fast, soaked from rain and travel. The man looked shaken. "My Alpha." Kael moved instantly. "What is it?" The spy reached slowly into his coat, then placed a folded piece of parchment onto the table. Kael unfolded it carefully and froze. A drawing. Charcoal sketch. A woman standing beside frozen cliffs beneath heavy snowfall. Black cloak. Silver eyes. Lyra.
Alive.
Kael stopped breathing completely, because after 5 years of searching, for the first time, he was finally looking at her again. The drawing changed everything. 3 days later, Alpha Kael Draven crossed the northern borders personally for the first time in years. No royal banners. No public army. Only a small hunting unit moving through the Frostfang wilderness beneath relentless snowfall. Because this time, the trail was real. The spy who delivered the drawing disappeared before sunrise. 2 scouts were later found unconscious near the eastern cliffs with strange silver claw marks burned into the snow around them. And 1 sentence repeated through terrified northern villages afterward. "The ghost Luna knows someone is hunting her." Kael rode through the storm without stopping. His eyes looked hollow now. Years of obsession had worn him down slowly. Every failed search, every rumor, every false sighting. And now finally, Lyra was alive. That truth terrified him almost as much as it relieved him. Because deep down, Kael already knew the woman he lost no longer existed. The forest grew darker the farther north they traveled. Ancient trees blocked most sunlight. Snow-covered abandoned wolf shrines hidden beneath ice. Even the hunting wolves became restless. One tracker slowed his horse suddenly. "My Alpha." Kael looked up immediately. The tracker pointed toward the snow ahead. Footprints. Fresh. 3 sets. Adult female. 2 smaller children. Kael's pulse hit hard enough to hurt.
Children.
The twins.
Real. Alive.
He dismounted immediately. Then another detail caught his attention. A 4th set of tracks. Large.
Male.
Kael's expression darkened instantly. The tracker noticed too. "Someone's traveling with them." Kael said nothing. But something ugly moved through his chest immediately. Jealousy. Hours later, the storm finally eased near dusk. The forest opened into a massive frozen clearing surrounded by cliffs and black pine trees. And there, Kael stopped breathing. A woman stood near the center of the clearing dressed entirely in black. Snow moved through dark strands of hair while silver eyes reflected the fading light beneath the storm clouds. Lyra.
Alive. Real.
Kael stared at her like a man seeing a ghost after years of grief. Because for so long, his memories became more vivid than reality itself. But this was her. Older now.
Colder somehow.
The softness he remembered had disappeared completely. Even from this distance, Kael could feel it immediately. The woman standing before him no longer carried emotional wounds openly. She carried control. The hunting party behind Kael shifted nervously, because the atmosphere inside the clearing felt wrong. Heavy. Dangerous. Lyra looked directly at Kael, without surprise. Like she already knew he was coming. The mate bond tightened violently inside Kael's chest the moment their eyes met. 5 years of separation collapsed instantly. Memories hit him hard all at once. Her laughter years ago. her waiting beside castle windows, her crying silently beside him while he stayed emotionally distant. And then, the final night. I kept waiting for you to choose me. Kael stepped forward slowly through the snow. His voice came rough. I searched for you for years. Lyra's expression never changed. No emotion, no warmth, only stillness. Then she answered quietly. Too late. Those two words hit harder than any scream ever could, because Kael heard the truth underneath them immediately. Too late to apologize. Too late to fix it. Too late to become the man she needed years ago. Wind moved violently through the clearing. Neither looked away. The tension between them felt unbearable now. The hunting wolves behind Kael suddenly whimpered softly, then backed away. Kael noticed immediately. Something else was nearby. Movement appeared between the trees behind Lyra. Two children stepped slowly into the clearing. And the moment Kael saw them, his entire world stopped. Silver eyes, dark hair. His son looked exactly like him at that age.
The same jawline.
Same stare. Except colder. Far colder. The little girl stood quietly beside her brother watching Kael carefully with terrifying calm. Kael's breathing became uneven instantly. The twins, his children, actually standing in front of him.
Alive.
His chest tightened so violently he almost couldn't speak. For years he imagined this moment endlessly. But nothing prepared him for the reality. Because these children didn't look curious. They looked hostile. Especially the boy. Kieran stepped slightly in front of his sister instinctively. Protective. The same way Kael once protected entire battlefields. Only now, that instinct was aimed directly against him. Kael swallowed hard. His voice nearly broke. Kieran, the boy's silver eyes narrowed immediately. You don't get to say my name. The clearing went completely silent. Kael froze. Because hatred from enemies felt familiar. Hatred from his own son felt devastating. Lyra remained motionless nearby, watching everything carefully. Kael looked toward the little girl next. She stared back coldly, then quietly whispered, You made our mother cry. Those words destroyed him instantly, because children speak with brutal honesty. No politics. No excuses. No complicated explanations. Only truth. And somehow that hurt more than war ever had. Kael stepped forward again slowly. I never stopped looking for you. Kieran laughed once. Sharp. Bitter. After abandoning her? Kael's expression cracked visibly. Because the boy sounded old enough to understand exactly what happened. Someone told him everything. Every lonely detail. Every silence. Every moment Kael failed their mother. The mate bond pulsed painfully again. Kael looked toward Lyra desperately now. I didn't know about the twins. Lyra finally reacted slightly. A faint bitter smile touched her lips. You didn't know many things. That sentence cut deep immediately. Because it was true. He didn't know she cried alone. Didn't know she felt unwanted. Didn't know she was pregnant. Didn't know she stopped hoping. He noticed everything too late. Suddenly, another presence emerged from the trees. Large figure. Dark coat. Silver-gray eyes locked directly onto Kael. Rowan. The rogue Alpha stepped beside Lyra calmly. Close enough to matter. And Kael understood the situation instantly. This man stayed beside her all these years. Protected her. Protected the twins. Raised his heirs. Something violent moved through Kael's chest immediately. The jealousy came so fast it almost shocked him. Rowan noticed. And stepped slightly closer toward Lyra on purpose. Protective. Confident. Like someone used to standing beside her. Kael's hands curled into fists instantly. The atmosphere inside the clearing turned dangerous immediately. Even the hunting wolves backed farther away. Because two powerful alphas now stood facing each other beneath the storm. Rowan's voice came low. You found them. Kael's eyes never left Lyra. They're my family. Rowan answered immediately. They became her family long before you arrived. That sentence landed like a blade. Because Kael suddenly realized the true punishment wasn't losing Lyra physically. It was losing every moment that came after. The birthdays. The first words. The years. The memories. Another man stood beside his children during all of it. Kieran moved closer toward Rowan, without hesitation. Instinctive trust. That hurt too. Kael finally understood something horrifying in that moment. His children already chose who they felt safe with.
And it wasn't him.
Snow began falling harder across the clearing again. Lyra stepped toward the twins slowly, then looked at Kael one final time. Still unreachable emotionally. Still distant. And somehow, that hurt worse than hatred ever could. Because the woman who once begged quietly for his love now looked completely free from him. And for the first time in his life, the Alpha understood what true loss felt like.